Good afternoon to everyone. It's Parshas this week, where the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim begins to develop in earnest. In the beginning of the Sedra, Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, L'chein emer l'bnei Yisrael ani Hashem. Therefore, say to the Bnei Yisrael, I am Hashem. Which Rashi explains means the name Hashem is the name of truth. Therefore, all the promises that I made to the forefathers, I'm now going to bring it to practice. I'm going to actually, as they say, put your money where your mouth is. I'm going to do what I promised. And therefore, I'm going to take you out of the burdens of Egypt. I will rescue you. I will redeem you. And I will take you to me as a nation. Then a little further it says, I will bring you to the land. So the four expressions of Hitzesi, the Hitzalti, the Ga'alti, the Lakachti are the four L'shoines Shel Geula. They're the four expressions of redemption. And corresponding to these four expressions of redemption, we have 4 cups of wine at the Seder, commemorating these 4 expressions of redemption. So the Baal HaTurim in this week's Seder says that the 4 expressions of redemption correspond to the 4 exiles. And the 4 expressions of redemption are redemption from the 4 exiles. So we have, I assume he is referring to the exile of Egypt and the exile of Babylon and the exile of being under the Greeks and then being under the Romans, the Edomites, Golus Edom. And the 4 expressions of Hitzesi, the Hitzalti, the Ga'alti, the Lakashti refer to 4 different redemptions from the 4 exiles. All this is mentioned at the very beginning of the story of the Exodus week. So at the beginning of the Exodus from Egypt, we were already promised not only an Exodus from Egypt, but we were promised an Exodus from all the exiles. Now, if the 4th expression is referring to a redemption from the exile of Edom, which is the exile that we're in right now, and the redemption from this exile is the final redemption. So what's the point of having a 5th expression, the Hevesi, I will bring you to the land? Once you're out of the final exile, you're at the highest level. So the answer is that in the coming of Mashiach itself, there's various stages. There's what we talk about as Yemesa Mashiach and days of Mashiach. Then we have the Elef Hashvi, the Yom Shapul Shabbos and Menucha, the Chayim HaElamim, day which is all Shabbos and rest and all eternity. The higher Madrega, Madrega Hamesim. So all the Madregas in the Geula Shlema are all included in those promises that we received before Yetzias Mitzrayim. Not only the Geula from Golus Edom, but even in the Geula from Golus Edom itself, a further stage, Behevesim, which is the Elef Hashvi, the Yom Shapul Shabbos and Menucha, the Chayim HaElamim, a day which is completely Shabbos and rest for all eternity. And it's all included in that initial promise that we received before we left Egypt. So the Frierdiker Rebbe would say that from Yetzias Mitzrayim on, fartments of the Geula Asid. From Yetzias Mitzrayim on, we're en route to the coming redemption. It's been launched already. We're en route. Which means that being that the launching of the Geula Shlema already took place, and it's just a question of development of that program, which is already launched by Yetzias Mitzrayim. So it's happening already. It's just it's got to fully manifest itself. Now, there's an interesting Gemara. The Gemara talks about those that follow the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvos will be familiar with the Sefer Nezikin, that the laws of the responsibilities that a person has for damage that's caused by his property, his animals, by a pit that he digs, various forms of damage. One of the forms of damage that a person with the Torah says you're responsible for is fire. You ignite a fire and the fire causes damage, you're responsible for that damage. So there's a discussion in the Talmud, what exactly is the nature of the responsibility that a person has for the damage that is caused by fire? Do we say that the fire is considered like you shot an arrow? Rabbi Yochanan says, Eishay mishum chitzon. You shoot an arrow, even though you didn't do the damage yourself, the arrow did the damage. But it's considered that you have caused that damage directly by shooting an arrow. So when you ignite a fire and the fire causes damage, We don't look at it as something that belonged to you caused that. We consider it that you caused that. And therefore, we treat it as though the person himself actively made that damage. And there's various halachic ramifications. Reish Lakish, another sage of the Talmud, disagrees with Rabbi Yechanan and says, no, reason you're culpable when you ignite a fire and the fire causes damage is because the fire belongs to you. And because the fire belongs to you, so therefore anything that belongs to you that causes damage, you're responsible. Like your animal causes damage, if your pit causes damage, something that belongs to you causes damage, you're responsible. The halacha is like Rabbi Yechanan. That Eishem Yishul Chitzon, it's considered like you shot an arrow. And therefore it's considered your like you yourself caused the damage. So there's one of the commentaries on the Talmud called the Muki Yitzit, asks a very practical question. He says, we know that on Shabbos, we're not responsible for our utensils. Our utensils are allowed to work on Shabbos. In other words, let's say you can put on an appliance, and the appliance can work a whole Shabbos, and no problem with that. As long as you don't switch it on Shabbos, you don't switch it off on Shabbos. The fact that your appliance is working is not a problem. Torah only forbade your animal to work. That's one exception. Otherwise, anything that belongs to you, your property, is allowed to work on Shabbos. However, you're not allowed to work in any form or fashion. So the question is, when we light candles before Shabbos, and the candles burn a few hours into Shabbos. So according to Reish Lakish, who says that when you light a fire, the damage which is caused by your fire is considered you're culpable because it's your property. It's no problem. Your property is allowed to work on Shabbos. So you lit a fire. The fire is your property, and it illuminates for a few hours into Shabbos. That's great. But according to Reish Lakish, who says that when you light a fire, it's considered like you are actively causing that damage yourself. So when you light candles before Shabbos, so the candles burn into Shabbos, it's considered like you are making that flame burn on Shabbos. So how are you allowed to do that? And the answer is that yes, it's considered like you're doing it, but it's all done the second that you light it. So you're doing it before Shabbos. And everything that's going to come out as a result of your actions that you did before Shabbos is considered done from that very moment. And this answers another question. The person shoots an arrow, and the arrow goes for some distance. And somewhere down the distance, there is an expensive object that the arrow destroyed. So just before the arrow, and so we said that the person is responsible. Right? He caused the damage. He shot the arrow directly at that object and it caused the damage. What if the person says, but 1 minute, I don't want the arrow to break that. Stop, arrow, stop. Or a person ignites a fire. Fire goes out of control. And he's standing there and he says, fire, stop. Yeah, don't hold me responsible for something that's out of my control. Right? So why are we holding him responsible for the damage that his arrow caused, the damage that his fire caused? It's out of his control. He's an onus. Onus Rahmana Patra. The Torah always absolves someone who's a. The answer is, at the moment that you ignited the fire, that act of igniting the fire was within your control. And at that moment, all the future damage that's going to be caused by that fire is considered like it was done at that moment. And at that moment, you had free choice. You did exactly what's done. And the same thing when it comes to lighting candles before Shabbos. The flame that's burning into Shabbos is considered that the second that you lit it, it's considered like everything that is achieved by that flame is considered done the second you did it, second you lit it, as far as you're concerned. So therefore, true, it's your direct effect, but it's the direct effect of an action that was done before Shabbos, and all the results of that action are considered done the moment it's done. So if this is the case, if we say that the launching of the final redemption took place by Yetzias Mitzrayim, it's like shooting a missile. Yeah, the missile could take time, 20 seconds, 60 seconds, an hour, 2 hours, depending on the missile is, until it lands on its destination. So during the time that the damage that the missile is going to cause is considered done at the moment of the launch. And therefore, the person who launched that missile is responsible. If you shoot an arrow, from the moment of the shooting of the arrow, anything that the arrow will cause is considered done at the moment of the shooting. If you light a fire and the fire reaches a certain place and causes damage, that damage is considered done at the moment of the igniting of the fire. So when Hashem launched the program of the future redemption by Yetzias Mitzrayim, it's considered a done deal. To illustrate it, it's a mashal that just to illustrate it with a simple mashal. Imagine the following scenario. You have a steep hill, and you have a truck coming down the hill. The truck has no brakes, and there's no driver. Coming down the hill, and at the bottom of the hill, lined up across the road, you have some very, very precious crystal vases lined up across the hill, across the road, in a very orderly fashion. Each one of those crystal vases is worth a fortune. How much would somebody bid on an auction for those crystal vases? Considering the fact that there's a driverless truck on its way down the hill that's going to smash them into smithereens. So the answer is, of course, nobody would offer a penny for them. They're worthless, even though they're beautiful and they're precious. And had there not be if there wasn't a truck on its way down the hill to smithereens, they'd be worth a lot of money. But because there is a truck on its way down the hill to smash them into smithereens, they are completely irrelevant. Similarly, Golus is a problematic entity, very challenging, very difficult, very painful. But when we realize that there's a truck called the Geula Shlema that's on its way down the hill, and it's already been launched, because it's on the way, and it's only a question of time for it to hit the target. Nothing's going to stop it. So for all practical purposes, all the overwhelming aspect of Golus is really a non-entity. Because the solution has already been launched and it's on the way, and it's as good as done. However, there's a problem with this. The problem with this comes from a Gemara in Tainis. Gemara says in Tainis that at the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, so the Gentiles entered the Beis Hamikdash on the 7th of March, and they carried on the Beis Hamikdash for 3 days, 7th, 8th of March. And on the 9th, towards evening, late in the afternoon, on the 9th of Av, they lit the Beis Hamikdash on fire. And it burned that entire night and the entire next day. That's one of the reasons why in the laws of Tisha B'Av, we know that there's certain limitations on what we're permitted to do on the day after Tisha B'Av until noon, because the Beis Hamikdash was still burning. Yeah, so they lit the fire on the Beis Hamikdash in the 9th of Av in the afternoon, late afternoon, and it burned the whole night and the next day. So Rabbi Yochanan, in the Gemara in Tainis says, Rabbi Yochanan was one of the sages of the Talmud, not to be confused with Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who lived at the time of the destruction. This is a different Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan says that I would have been around at the time of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. I would have been part of the group of sages that instituted the fast of Tisha B'Av. I would have opined, would have been my opinion, that we should fast on the 10th. Why? Because the majority of the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed on the 10th of Av. So why should we fast on the 9th of Av when only a small part of the Beis Hamikdash was burned? We should fast on the 10th of Av when the entire Beis Hamikdash was burned. That's Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. So the question is, the obvious question is, this same Rabbi Yochanan we just said before is of the opinion that when you light a fire, it's considered like an arrow. And we said that means that the entire damage is considered done the second that you light it. And that's why you can't scream, it's beyond my control. Because when you lit it, it was within your control. And it's all considered done in that moment. So if that's the case, Rabbi Yochanan, who says that when you light a fire, it's all considered done in the moment of igniting, shouldn't he hold that since the fire of the Beis Hamikdash was ignited on the 9th of Av, we should fast on the 9th of Av? If Reish Lakish, who disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan and Baba Kama, would have said we should fast on the 10th of Av. That would make sense. But Rabbi Yochanan, he's the one who says, he's the one who says you're culpable for your fire, because it's like shooting an arrow, it's like shooting a missile. And it's all considered done from the first moment. So why then should Rabbi Yochanan opine that we should fast on the 10th of Av? Surely, according to him, we should fast on the 9th of Av. So the answer that's given is that there's a difference between this matter as it applies to the Almighty. What's the difference? Very simple. If a human being shoots an arrow, and the arrow is halfway there, he says, "Stop! Stop! Stop! I don't want it to destroy me." He has no control over that. So since he has no control over it, everything that's going to happen is his responsibility from the first moment. From the moment that it's left his hand, everything that's going to happen is considered done, and he's responsible. But in the case of the Almighty, he's omnipotent. He can do anything he wants. So if the arrow is on its way, the missile is on its way, and he says, "Stop," it's going to stop. And at every second that it doesn't stop, it's only because he hasn't asked it to stop. So with something we're talking about, when it comes to the destruction of Beis Hamikdash, we say in Nachem, Tisha B'Av, Ata Hashem ba'eshi tzaka. You, Hashem, ignited the destruction fire. Although we said before the Gentiles lit the fire, but they were only the agents of the Almighty. Ata Hashem ba'eshi tzaka. It was Hashem that chose to destroy the Beis Hamikdash. That the Beis Hamikdash should be destroyed, and therefore it was destroyed. And the Ba'eshat also was later. You're going to rebuild it twice. So since we're talking about a divine act is very different from a human act. When it comes to a divine act, being that he's omnipotent, he can change things at any time, let's give a practical illustration. Beis Hamikdash was ignited in fire on the night of. Yeah, what would have happened if that night, the middle of the night, all of Klal Yisrael would have done a perfect tshuva and corrected all mitnei chata'im, all the sins that brought about destruction? Beis Hamikdash would be corrected, and everybody would become tzaddikim gemur. What would have happened? Obviously, the fire would have stopped. The fact that it didn't stop was only because Hashem wanted it to continue to. So when it comes to a divine act, every second that things develop it's a whole different story. But when it comes to a human act, since the human being leaves his control in the first second, so it's definitely going to happen. It's definitely going to happen. It's considered done for the first time. That's why the same Rabbi Yochanan, when it comes to damages that are caused by a human being, he says that it's considered like a fire is considered like shooting an arrow, and it's all considered your responsibility from the first second. But when it comes to the Beis Hamikdash, which is a divine act, there he says we should fast on the 10th of Av because it hasn't happened until it's happened. Yeah, is that clear? So if that's the case, coming back to our discussion about the coming of Mashiach, the final redemption. So we said before that from the moment that the project of the final redemption was launched, it's considered like a done deal. But since the final redemption comes from Hashem, and Hashem is always able to stop the process, so even though it's launched already by Yetzias Mitzrayim, it's not a done deal. Because he's in control all the time. Even if we compare it to a missile or an arrow, which is on its way, and it's definitely going to reach its target, that's only if you're dealing with a human being. But you're dealing with Hashem, who's omnipotent, can always stop any process at any time he chooses. So it's not considered a done deal. So everything we said before, but the whole muscle of the truck coming down the road and the vases that are going to be smashed to smithereens, that puts holes in the whole argument because it's in the hands of Hashem. It might not happen. You can stop. So the answer is in another halacha. There's a halacha we're all familiar with, mitzvah, that a false prophet is a terrible sin to prophesy in the name of Hashem, something that Hashem didn't say. A false prophet is a very severe punishment. The pasuk says, how are you going to know if he's a false prophet? So the answer is very simple. If he says in the name of Hashem that something is going to happen, and it doesn't happen, then you know that he's a false prophet. So he says tomorrow is going to rain, and tomorrow comes and goes and it doesn't rain. Hashem told me to tell you tomorrow it's going to rain. And if tomorrow it's going to snow, tomorrow's going to be a tornado. I don't know. Yeah, and it comes and goes and it doesn't happen. So then you know he's a false prophet. Very simple. Hashem speaks only the truth. And Hashem told him to tell us. He claims that Hashem told him to tell us that tomorrow it's going to be such and such. Tomorrow comes and goes and it doesn't happen. So we know that he's this false prophet. So the question is, we're all familiar with the story of Yoina ben Amita. Right? You read it on your kid. What was Yona's prophecy? Yona's prophecy was that in 40 days, Nineveh will be overturned. He came in the name of Hashem. He said, so said Hashem, in 40 days, Nineveh will be overturned. Was Nineveh overturned? No. So is Yonah a false prophet? So we're saying that there's a difference between if a Navi prophesizes and predicts in the name of Hashem a good thing, or he prophesizes and predicts a retribution. When it comes to a good thing, so Hashem promises something good, he never withdraws. So if a Navi comes along and Hashem told me tomorrow there's going to be gold falling from the sky, and the sky doesn't come gold falling from the sky, we know it's a false prophet, because Hashem said there's going to be gold falling from the sky, there's going to be gold falling from the sky. If it doesn't happen, he must be a false prophet. But if he says that there's going to be a punishment, there's going to be a destruction, yeah, and it doesn't happen, so first of all, it's possible people repented, and they averted the decree. It's possible that Hashem, and not only it's possible, Hashem is very kind and compassionate and patient, and he sometimes withdraws retribution. So even though it was predicted and it was prophesied, it might not happen. So there's an essential difference in a good thing and a bad thing. So now we have to answer our question. So when it comes to the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, there we say that from the second it was ignited, you don't know what's going to happen further. Because at any time Hashem could stop. And if Yidden would have done tshuva right away, he would have stopped. And therefore, Rabbi Yechanan says we should fast only on the 10th of Av, because that's when it actually burnt down. Until it happens, it doesn't happen. It hasn't happened. But when it comes to something good, like the coming of Mashiach, when Hashem says, "V'heitzesi v'hitzalti v'ga'alti v'lakachti," the Baal Turim says it refers to all four redemptions, including the final redemption, in all its stages. That means that when that's launched at the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim or before Yetzias Mitzrayim, and it's a good thing, so a good thing Hashem doesn't retract. So although he's able to retract, he can do anything he wants. But he himself set out a system in which a good thing he doesn't retract. So when a good process is launched, when a good project is launched, from the moment of the launching, it's considered a done deal. Just like it is when a human being strikes a fire. So therefore, coming back to what we were saying before, that the coming of Mashiach and the ultimate redemption from this Golus, which was already launched at the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim, is considered for all practical purposes a done deal. Like the truck that's coming down the hill, and there's nothing to stop it. So you know for sure it's going to smash those vases that are lined up across the road. So it's a done deal. Just like you wouldn't pay a penny on an auction for those vases, because you know that even though they're there and they're beautiful, there's no way you can save them from their destiny. Similarly, the Golus, as overwhelming as it might be, and as difficult as it might be, and as problematic as it might be, you know it's nothing to get overwhelmed about, because it's about to be smashed by the smithereens by this truck of redemption that's on its way down the hill without brakes. However, there's one point that needs to be borne in mind. That is, that brakes this truck doesn't have, but an accelerator it is. It has an accelerator, and we have the ability to press on that accelerator for every good deed that we do. Even though the coming of Mashiach is not something that can be prevented, it's not something that can be stopped, because it's already been launched and the missile is on its way. But we can accelerate it. And we accelerate it through every good deed that we do. And through our betachim, and through our tefillos, there any questions on that? Go ahead.
So they didn't stop the accelerate.
So the question is asked over here that just like through good deeds we accelerate the process of redemption, perhaps through sin we delay the process of redemption. It's a very good question, but it appears that in a certain sense, since it's already been launched, and when it comes to a good thing, Hashem has set into motion a system, and a good thing He doesn't retract. So whatever is set into motion, is launched into motion, will continue. The only question is we can speed it up. We can make it bigger, better, faster, or we cannot make it bigger, better, or faster. So when we say that when we say that sin delays, perhaps it means it holds back from making it bigger, better, and faster. But it doesn't actually put brakes on. Because something good that Hashem has promised doesn't have any brakes. Okay. We're going to move on to Tanya. We're starting today chapter 50. Perek Nun. Which is on page Ayin, the bottom of page Ayin.
Two 261, 262.
261 and 262. Thank you very much. So we're at the bottom of page Ayin, Perek Nun. Perhaps we should give a little bit of a introduction as we're charting we're going into new territory over here, and that's quite different from what we were learning before. Throughout the previous chapters, the Alter Rebbe spoke a lot about various levels of Avas Hashem, love for Hashem, how it motivates us to study Torah and to do mitzvahs. Now, we pointed out in some earlier chapters that when it comes to things like Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, which are compared in the Zohar to wings, said that just like a bird has wings, so the Torah that we study and the mitzvahs that we perform have wings. The wings are the love of Hashem and the fear of Him. And they are what makes it Parshas Ha'ela. They cause it to fly up. Person studies Torah and does a mitzvah without any Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, without any love of Hashem and fear of Hashem. So there's no life force, there's no kind, there's no passion in the Torah and the mitzvah. So it remains very physical, and it cannot rise up to the higher realms. So although he's fulfilled the mitzvah, he's done a very good thing, but it needs wings to be able to be lifted up. When a person studies Torah and fulfills mitzvahs, inspired by a love for Hashem and inspired by a reverence of Hashem, so the love of Hashem and the reverence of Hashem, Ava B'Yirah, act as wings to lift up the Torah mitzvahs, give them an energy, give them a passion, give them a life, and they have become that they're able to lift up the Torah mitzvahs to a higher realm, and they stand before Hashem. And we learned various levels of Ava B'Yirah, or different types of wings, how high they bring them. So the point is that it's not the Ava and the Yirah that are what we're really focused on, what we're trying to achieve. Trying to achieve Torah and mitzvahs. Torah study and performance of mitzvahs is what connects us with Hashem. But the Torah that we're studying, the mitzvahs that we're performing, need to be, Torah needs to be alive. The mitzvahs need to be alive. How do we bring them to life? Through the passion that we inject into them. That's the Ava B'Yirah that we've been talking. So essentially, if a person would develop a love and a fear of Hashem, a love or a fear of Hashem, that was in itself, that was self-contained. The Ava is just about Ava. It's not an Ava that inspires the performance of mitzvahs. That would not be the point. The point is not just to love Hashem. The point is to love Hashem in a way that inspires Torah and mitzvahs. The Alter Rebbe is going to explain that there is another level of love, which at first glance is completely separated, completely divorced from a practical implication of how this is going to get me to serve Hashem better. It's going to get me to study more Torah and full mitzvahs. And that is a totally different kind of love. Then he's going to explain how, nevertheless, this love also inspired faith. And let's take it slowly. All the levels of love of Hashem that we spoke about in all the previous chapters, they all have in common, although there are various approaches, various contemplations that lead to a very different type of love of Hashem throughout the 49 chapters that we've learned until now. But they all have one thing in common, and that is that they're misitra the yamina. They're from the right side. And they're all from the level that is referred to Kabbalistically as the Kohen, the man of kindness. Now, generally, we know that there's Chesed and there's Gvura. Chesed is on the right side, and Gvura is on the left side. We say in Pasuk Eliyahu on Friday afternoon from the Kunei Zayhar, Chesed Droya Yemina. Chesed is Hashem's right arm, and Gvura is Hashem's left arm. So the Sitra the Yemina, the right side, the level of Kayin Ish Chesed. The Kayin is the man of Chesed. You know, Arna Kayin is, we say the Kayanim, when they duchen, they say, Levarech es Ama Yisrael, the Ahava, to bless his people Israel with love. And we know that Aaron was Ayev Shalom, Reidev Shalom, Ayev es Abriyes, he loved peace, pursued peace, he loved the creations, and brought them near to Torah. So that's all love and kindness and chesed. So all the levels of love that we spoke about until now, they're all from the right side. And they're from the level of Kayin Ish Chesed, as opposed to what we're going to see later, that the Levi is connected with Gvura. The Nikra Kesef HaKadosh, and it's referred to as the holy silver. What does the silver have to do with this issue? The word Kesef is Melashon Nichseif Nichsafta Lebeisem. The word Kesef in Hebrew is the same word as Nichseif Nichsafta, to belong to yearn. So the various types of love that we discussed until now can all be summed up as a love that causes a yearning and a longing for God. And because it causes a yearning and a longing for God, it inspires the person to want to do whatever he can to make his connection with Hashem stronger, to learn more Torah, which brings him closer to Hashem and brings Hashem closer to him, to do more mitzvahs that brings Hashem's presence into his life. So because we learn about the greatness of Hashem, and we're inspired to want to get closer to him, to want to bring him closer to us, bring him into our lives. So that inspires us to study the Torah and perform the mitzvahs that are going to make our connection with Hashem stronger. So it's basically, we exist, and we're trying to make our existence a better existence through bringing ourselves closer to Hashem and bringing Hashem into our being. He doesn't just bring the words nichsef nichsapta, he also brings the words lebeis avicha. So that's the pasuk that the Lavan said to Yaakov, I understand why you left me, because nichsef nichsapta lebeis avicha, you were longing and yearning for your father's house. Therefore, you decided you had enough here, and I'm not eyeing it. You want to go back there to Israel, be with your father. I understand that. However, whatever Lavan continues them. So the words nichsef nichsapta are the same root as kesef, silver. So the yearning and longing for godliness is described by the word Kesef HaKadosh, the holy longing. Like in the pasuk, Nichsef Nichsafta Lebeis Avicha. So you might ask, the word Kesef is in the words Nichsef Nichsafta. Both Nichsef and Nichsafta have the same root as the word Kesef. So we see how silver is associated with longing and yearning. But why does the Alter Rebbe bring the words Lebeis Avicha? What difference does it make what the yearning and the longing was? Your father's house. So one of the answers to this question is that we learned in the earlier chapters that Chachma and Bina are called father and mother. Chachma is called the father, and Bina is called the mother. We're going to learn that normally the various levels of love that we spoke about in the previous chapters are more reflective of Chachma than they are of Bina. Chachma is also on the right side. if you set out the three moichin, the three intellectual faculties, Chachma, Bina, and Das, Chachma is on the right, Bina is on the left, and Das is in the center. Just like Chesed is on the right, and Gvura is on the left, and Tiferes is in the center. So in the intellectual faculties, Chachma is on the right, Bina is on the left, and Das is in the center. And if you set out the Sfiris in the three columns, so the right column would be Chachma, Chesed, Tzach. Left column would be Bina, Gvura, Ha'id. The center column is Dalet, Das, Tiferes, and so Chesed on top, and opposite. So Chachma has a special connection with Chesed, and Bina has a special connection with Gvura. So as we're going to explain that the love that we spoke about in the previous chapters is more connected with Chesed. It's the Madrega of Kayin, Isha Chesed. And the love that we're going to speak about later in this chapter is from Gvura. And it comes from Bina, Makar HaGvura Shehi Bina, the source of Gvura, which is Bina. So therefore, over here, when he talks about what we've spoken about till now, the various levels of longing and yearning, and he calls them Kesef HaKadoshim, he says the word Kesef HaKadoshim comes from the pasuk Nichseif Nichsafta, and he adds also the words Lebeis Avicha, because we want to emphasize the fact that this is connected with Chachma, which is called the Father. However, there is another type of Ava, another type of divine of love for Hashem, which rises above everything we spoke about today. All the different approaches that we spoke about coming to love Hashem, they all have in common because I realize Hashem's greatness. I want to be closer to Him. I want to enhance my existence by getting closer to Him, either by lifting myself up to Him or by bringing Him down to me. Remember, at the end of the last chapter, we spoke about both those things. We spoke about how we develop Haftas Hashem Alekecha is a yearning to become closer to Hashem, and we have to bring His presence into our lives by speaking the words of Torah and fulfilling the practical mitzvahs. And by doing that, we bring Hashem's presence into our lives, into our world. However, there is a higher level of love that rises above all the levels of love that we spoke about. The Mailas Hazav ala Kesef, like the advantage of gold over silver. So all the levels of love that we spoke about till now were compared to silver. And the love that we're going to describe in this chapter is compared to gold. Now, gold, besides the fact that it's more expensive than silver, but that is relative. This is more expensive, this is less expensive. So it's can be there's a measuring stick there. You can measure how much is gold more preferable than silver. You put a number on it. However, there's another aspect to gold, and that is the sight of gold has a fiery dimension to it, which puts it into a totally different category than silver. So the Maila of Zav ala Kesef, the advantage of gold over silver, is not just more expensive. It's a whole different existence. And in the same way, the love which is compared to gold is a whole different kind of love than the love which is compared to silver, as he will explain. This is a love like coals of fire. And its inspiration, this love is in the supernal Gvura of the higher Bina, which means Bina, which is in the intellectual faculties, is the mother of Gvura, which is in the emotional faculties. So there is a love that comes not from Chesed, but from Gvura Salyanis, the Bina Ilah, from the supernal Gevura, severity of the higher Bina. Hainu, which means, by contemplating on the greatness of the infinite one blessing. And which aspect of his greatness? The Kula Kamei Kilah Mamish Chashiv, realizing that his greatness is so intense, and it's so incredible, and it's so infinite, that everything before him is totally non-existent. Totally has no worth whatsoever, no significance, it's insignificant. Hashem is infinite, and being that Hashem is infinite, anything that has any finite aspect to it whatsoever is not just less than him, it's non-existent before him. Because finite in the presence of the infinite is like non-existent. So when a person contemplates through the Vuras al Yenis of Bina Ilah, he contemplates on the fact that everything before Hashem is complete, is absolutely nothing. And the only thing that's really worth anything is Hashem himself. So tislahit v'tislahit v'nefesh, the soul will become impassioned, inflamed, likar tif'eres b'duasa, to the glory of the beauty of his greatness. Ulistakola b'kara the malchut, to gaze at the glory of the king. Hirishbei eish shal heves, like flaming coals. Shal heves aza, fierce flame. Ha'oila l'mayla, that rises upward. V'lipared mehapsila v'ha'etzim shenachezes b'hem, to want to sever oneself from the wick and the wood that is holding them down. In other words, we said the neshama is like a flame, and the flame needs a wick which holds it down. The flame is continuously flickering; it's continuously struggling to get away from the wick and to become absorbed in its heavenly source, and the wick is holding it down. So the contemplation of the person and the greatness of Hashem, which is completely infinite, and before whom everything that he knows, which is finite, is completely worthless. So the type of feeling that generates in a person is that you want to escape from the reality of the world that you find yourself in, and just become fused in the realm of the infinite. So it's not like wanting to make a more meaningful connection between the finite and the infinite. When you want to make a more meaningful connection between the finite and the infinite, that means you still recognize the finite as something that can be helped. It's something that can be in some way enhanced by developing a connection with the infinite. But if you realize that you're literally nothing before Hashem, who is everything, so then all you want to do when the penny drops, when you really get it, all you want to do is cease being yourself and just become one with Hashem. So by gazing at the glory of Hashem, with their flaming coals shall heves azah ha'elamei left, fierce flame that rises spontaneously. It becomes a yearning and a desire to sever oneself from the wick and the wood that's holding one down. In other words, you just want to expire. And this is by strengthening the divine element of fire that there is in the godly soul. In other words, he's saying it's not just this contemplation is not just a question of you understand something and therefore it inspires you to behave in a certain way. The neshama has ingrained within itself a natural yearning beyond any limitations to Hashem. The neshama is desperate to become fused with Hashem himself, even if it means losing its own identity completely. That's the natural yearning of the neshama. The problem is that we're not always in touch with the natural yearning of the neshama. So this contemplation of the infinity of Hashem to the exclusion where nothing else is worth anything before him is only Hashem and nothing else. So this helps arouse the natural yearning and longing there is in the neshama to sever itself completely from its existence in this world and become absolutely fused in the oneness of Hashem. Yes. So first of all, we're saying, the question is, how can we do that? I'm not sure we have to do that. It's a very, very lofty level. We're going to see that this is, but we definitely have to be aware of it and know that if we understood the greatness of Hashem, the way it's being explained over here, we would feel that way, because we essentially feel that way deep down in our neshama. So when you realize, you contemplate on the greatness of Hashem in his infinity, right? And juxtapose that with our own existence and our own experiences and our own interests that are finite and therefore meaningless in comparison to the infinity of Hashem. So the natural process that kicks in is a desire to completely give up the existence on the finite level and just become one with the infinite. We're going to get to that. Okay? At first glance, it does. And that's the striking difference between everything we learned until now and this. Okay? So first we have to get a good understanding of what this Ava is, and then we're going to find out how even this Ava can be turned around into an inspiration to make a difference. This is, okay, the question was the desire is from the group. This is a desire that's coming from the neshama, and it's revealing a deep emotion that is coming from the essence of the neshama. As we will see. So this is through strengthening the overpowering of the Yesod HaEsh, of the element of fire, the godly fire, the godly soul. And from this one comes to a tremendous thirst for godliness. And this is interesting because the neshama is a godly entity. So you would think that the neshama should feel comfortable with Hashem. Godliness and godliness. But he says there's an aspect of yearning and thirsting. Even the neshama looks at itself and puts itself up against the infinity of Hashem. It wants out. It wants completely to just be one with Hashem. So it comes to a tremendous thirst. As the pasuk says, Sama lecha nafshi. My soul thirsty. And we're talking about my soul, and we're talking about the godly soul. So the godly soul, as godly as it is and as holy as it is, but nevertheless, when it realizes the infinity of Hashem, it thirsts and yearns and just wants to be one with Hashem. The achar kach, and then as this develops further, l'chinas chaylas ava, comes to a love sickness. Love sickness means when there's something that you really desperately want, and you feel that it's beyond you. There's nothing you can do to get it. You become frustrated. You become ill over it. So this focus on the fact that we so desire to become one with Hashem, and as much as we desire, we just can't achieve it. It brings the person to a yearning and a longing to the point of Chaylas Abba, love sickness. And then you let this process develop further. It comes to the point where the soul literally wants to expire. As the pasuk says, "Gam kol sanafshi." After the word nichsifa, my soul longs. It says, "Gam kol sanafshi," my soul also expired. So it's not, as we said before, it's not about enhancing the existence of my soul. It's not about strengthening my bond with Hashem. It's about completely expiring. That's the passion that we're describing. And it's from this love, this relationship with Hashem that we're describing here in this chapter. This is the root of the Levites. We have the Kohanim, whose avodah is chesed, and then there's the Leviim, whose avodah is gevurah. So what did the Leviim do in the Beis Hamikdash? The Leviim in the Beis Hamikdash sang, when offerings being brought, they sang very sweet melodies and played very sweet music that developed that inner passion within the neshama to have such a yearning for godliness like it wants to expire. So the avodah of the Leviim, in a sense, is a higher avodah than the avodah of the Kohanim. Because the Kohanim are what we learned about until now, in the first 49 chapters of time. A love that is about enhancing my own existence, through bringing me closer to Hashem, and bringing Hashem into my life. While the Leviim represent such a passion for godliness that you want to you're thirsting for godliness to the point of the expiration of the soul. Now, if that's the case, why then are Kohanim higher than the Leviim? The answer is because we're not really on the level to be able to deal with the avodah of Leviim. It's too high for us. Kayanim is the highest Avodah that we can actually relate to. And therefore, Ula Achi, in the future, after the coming of Mashiach, when the world will become elevated to a higher level, Yohem HaKayanim, the Leviim will become the Kayanim. There is a teaching of the Arizal on the pasuk, which is the Haftarah of Parshas Emer. The Haftarah of Parshas Emer begins with the words "V'hakayanim haLevim b'nei Tzad." The Kayanim, the Levites, the children of Tzad. So, simply speaking, Kayanim are from Shevet Levi, so they're called Hakayanim haLevim. But we don't talk like that. We describe Kayanim and we describe Levim. So why does it say Hakayanim haLevim b'nei Tzad? Could have just said Hakayanim b'nei Tzad. So the Arizal says that this pasuk is teaching us that in the future, the Kayanim will become the Levim will become the Kayanim.
Is the level of is there in Hashem's inside?
It sounds like it. Yeah. That's why Parcha Mishmasam, their souls expired. Yeah. So now just to clarify, this issue of the Kayanim become a Levim, not so simple. Because one of the principles is Haftarah Zulei Tia Muchletes. The Torah will never change. And the Torah says that the Kayanim are Kayanim, the children of Aaron are Kayanim. Right? If a father is a Kayan, the son is a Kayan. So what does the Arizal mean when he says that the Leviim today will be the Kayanim of the future? So there is an interesting explanation from the Rabbi, who suggests that what it means is that Torah won't change. Only the one who has a father, a Kayan, could be a Kayan. But the souls of the Leviim will be born to Kayan. So the spiritual dimension that is described over here, what is a Levi essentially? This very, very lofty, passionate love for Hashem that brings to the point of thirst, that leads to love sickness, that leads to actual exploration of the soul. That's the level of Levi. And in the future, when the world will become refined and elevated and will be able to handle that madrega, they will become the Kayan. Meaning their souls will be born to Kayanim and they will become the Kayan. What was the service of the Leviim? Laharim ke'elrina v'taida v'shira v'zimra, to elevate a sound of song and thanksgiving, with singing and with music, the nigun and ne'ima, with tune and with sweetness, a to and fro kind of experience, where on one hand there was a tremendous yearning to cease to exist in the way we do exist and become absolutely fused with the essence of Hashem. And at the same time, a realization of the fact that Hashem's will is that we remain here in this physical world. And therefore, we have to turn it around and remain in the physical world, albeit that our yearning and our striving and our desire is to completely come away from this physical world. This is this very fierce love. Like the flame that comes from the lightning, it's like it shoots out and it's withdrew. It retracted, shoots out and retracted, shoots out and retracted. In Isa B'Gemara Perek Beis the Chagiga. Then the Alter Rebbe says, "Be abshal levayin inyan zeh hated b'mitzvah." This is such a delicate matter that it's very difficult to describe this properly in writing. Rakol ish nilva v'novei hamaskil al dov. Every heartfelt and understanding person that has insight into this matter, umaimik, and delves in deeply with asher daita tunasei b'avayit, connect his das, his knowledge and his understanding in Hashem, yimtza toiv, will be able to find this goodness, the oir hagonus, and the light which is hidden, the nefesh hamaskelos, in the intellectual soul. Each person according to his measure. So don't expect this to be something that's straight across the board. The reaction that different people will have to this contemplation will be different because each person according to his measure. Yesh mispal chulu, v'yesh mispal chulu. Some people will react emotionally in one way and some people in another way. But it can only work achrei k'dimas yiraschem. It can only work if you first preface the fear of sin. In other words, absolute rejection of sin. To be absolutely turned away from evil. That there shouldn't be any sins that are separating us from Hashem. Because if a person has any sins on his record that are separating from Hashem, he won't be able to develop this experience of the neshama. The neshama is then like blocked from experiencing itself. So the only way that a person can achieve such or anything near such a feeling is by first completely turning away from anything which is questionable, anything which has to cause a blockage between him and Hashem. And then you can actually experience the deep emotions of the neshama. What are the deep emotions of the neshama? The pure state of the neshama is that the neshama feels such an incredible longing and yearning and a thirsting for Hashem that it comes to chelas ava and then to place hanefesh. And it's like at the verge of expiring, and you have to somehow manage to convince it to hold out, because as we're going to see further, this is what Hashem wants. So this is a totally higher level of Ava. It goes into a totally different category from everything that we learned in the previous chapters. Now, the way it's been presented up till now, it's all about the direction of this love is escaping from my own existence, and therefore it doesn't seem to fit with becoming the motivation for Torah and mitzvahs, which is what we've been speaking about all along in the previous chapters, that Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem are mainly there for the purpose of becoming a motivator for Torah and mitzvahs. That's the tachlis. The tachlis is that we connect to Hashem through the study of Torah and the performance of mitzvahs. And the reason we put so much focus on love of Hashem and fear of Hashem is only because they are the motivators that cause the study of Torah and performance of mitzvahs to become alive and active and passionate. In the second part of the chapter, he's going to explain how even this love functions as a very powerful motivator in a totally different category to motivate a tremendous passion in Torah. That will come in Yisrael Hashem in the next part. Okay, we'll hold it over here. Tonight is Rosh Chodesh Shvat. I wish everybody a good Chodesh. Shvat is a very special month, especially in Bible, considering the fact that it contains the yard site of the Rebbe and the beginning of the Messias of the Rebbe. And then later in the month, you have the yard site of the Rebbe's entire Mushka on the 22nd of Shvat. Before that, you have on the 13th of Shvat, the yard site of the Rebbe's Rivka, the 13th of Shvat, the yard site of the Rebbe's son, the Rebbe's mother, the Rebbe's Shad. And on Yud Shvat is also the yard site of the Rebbe's Rivka, the Rebbe's grandmother, the yard site of the Rebbe's was an exceptional individual. So it's a month that's full of very, very powerful energies that can be used and should be used. And the emphasis on health. Today's Kippur Kaplan is a very useful today and coming into a very special month. So our tefillas should be heard, and the emphasis should send us a Shlema and solve all our problems very, very quickly.